response video to the modern mystic, and yeah, I'll try, Nick. I mean, I'll try to make this concise, but you know, I do have a lot of notes, and I only did 3 minutes of your video, and I wanted to play some of this. But yeah, so I mean, all I can say is I'll try to speed it up a little bit because I know spring's coming, and busy. Anyway, all right, sorry, I just wasted time. Sorry. So your critique was, right, the last video didn't explain this overriding the lower function thing that's taking place inside mammal brains. I would argue that all mammals have this functionality, and the distinction is just language. Language is the difference between us and them, because that lets us do the whole conceptual thing, the abstract thinking thing. A lot of that extra bonus material is made available through language. You know, without our language and without all the knowledge in books and all the knowledge that's stored in books, we would be, you know, monkeys. Anyway, ugly, you know, monkeys. Anyway, doesn't matter. All right, so number one, the context sense. So let's call it, just to give it a word, the context sense. All right, these mammals have a context sense where they have a personal experience, they live through, they learn. Okay, they're learning creatures. So they modify their programming based on this personal experience thing. They go through the world, they bump into things, they go ouch. Their brain says, remember the ouch. This is our life experience. You know, trees cause us ouch, where somebody else might have a perfectly good affair with a tree. We didn't. We have ouch. Our psychology has changed. We have a different pattern of reflex created by this learning memory thing. Memory is a key word here, maybe. So I use terms like educated, programmed by personal experience. So that could be a thing underlined, programmed by personal experience. And that's this context sense that we ultimately, again, as I said in the video, and you shitted on the video, but I don't think the video was just vomit. It was an explanation that this is the door in and out. Is this context sense is the last thing everything goes through, almost kind of like our vision. It's the full sense, this consciousness, and this is everything. We can control everything from it going down or up through it. It's the door in and the door out. It's got all the levers of access is there. Except for the most dramatic. We obviously can't, and a lot of times we can control some pain. We can certainly control all emotional pain using it, applying context. But yeah, there's some things you're just not going to fix. There's a elephant on your foot. You're going to be a little too distracted in your little context sense. You're not going to be able to place a context on top of that that's going to make it go away. Usually, not unless you're incredibly disciplined. Anyway, so like I said, in humans, it's conformed to the experience. And then I talked about language acquisition, education, and damn, I wish I could read. And media, social media. We learn a lot from medias, from movies and from stories and from fiction. It gives us it feeds our imagination. There's a word for that. When something's a proxy through which you are inspired. But yeah, there's a lot of that crap going on. Shared imagination. I even use that word. That we're able to do that. We can stimulate each other through this shared imagination. And so you're just basically asking me to give you a more perfect metaphor for this function, and I thought we sort of conceded that being that explicit about the mechanics is not going to be that simple, and so we came up with the puppet thing, or the midget thing, and the dwarf, sorry. And yeah, if those aren't adequate, then yeah, we'll have to go somewhere else. I'll have to get more explicit, more mechanical, start going back to the drawings, and you don't like them either. So, you're really getting awfully demanding here. So, whatever. I don't know what to say to that. Alright, so the second thing I noted was suffering is not part of it. So you're arguing that I can't talk about the suffering thing that I think is the elephant in the room. You're saying the elephant in the room is the you suffer thing. The word you is problematic, and I don't see any problem there. I mean, I thought we already agreed when you say the word you, or when we say I, or we say me, we're talking about the clump that is me. I thought we agreed that we were clumps. I don't really care if you call me a you yourself, or whether you call me a something, or you call me a non-somebody, but a something. I don't really care. It's just like, who cares? I don't care. I mean, that's just, I don't even see the point of it. We certainly can recognize the clumps. I recognize Nick Clump and Gary Clump. I mean, we're clumps, and we're not the same thing. We're not connected through anything but some transfer of matter and stuff, but we are individual clumps. Well, anyway, I'll get to another metaphor that I thought might fix this. Let me just point out that for me, this suffering thing is sort of different. You're saying it's, well, this goes back to number 4, but I'll start here with number 2. You're saying the suffering thing, the feeling thing, is the same as the vision thing or the hearing thing, that they're all the same thing. And I sort of tried to make the argument that they're not the same thing, that the feeling thing is being used to taint everything else with a qualitative taint. It goes ouch for a reason. It's different. The other stuff doesn't do the ouch thing. Okay? This feeling ouch thing is a different mechanism, a different function of the brain than is the pattern recognition that is, I'll put this in the truck category, or I'll put this in the house category. I mean, when we put the number 2 in a category, you know, there's not a huge amount of sensation involved. There's maybe a little bit, but there's just not. And this other thing has it's all carrot and stick. There's a little carrot and stick engine running here. And it creates this qualitative state that is attached to this other thing. And there's a mechanism between those things that attaches them. There's a function that attaches them, but they're not the same pieces of paper. They're not just file page 1 and page 2 and you just staple them together. Or if they are, the staple is different than the pages. So there's 3 components, but the 3 components are not similar. You know, 2 of them are similar and 1 of them is a staple. I mean, it's completely dissimilar. And that's how I'm arguing that our feeling capacity is created by a different engine of the brain, and the rest of the reflexes are reacting to that engine. That internal engine is creating a reaction provoker of its own. So the brain, I've sort of metaphored, I don't have 2 hands here, but you know, the brain collects information, reacts to it, creates a spark of feeling, a blob of that chemical. Then it reacts to the presence of that chemical in another part of the brain. But there is this gap there. There is this distance between the image. It's the difference between the projector and the screen or whatever. And there's all kinds of filters between those things. And then it has the camera on the screen, and it's re-seeing what's on the screen and then shoving it back into the projector. And so this is how the machine is working. And it's that gap between screen and camera and projector and screen. These gaps are important because that function is different. There's a transition. And I used the metaphor of a transformer in one of the videos. I mean, it is different. And you're going to keep saying truck. The pattern recognition of seeing a truck is the same as the pattern recognition of smashed leg, and I'm just saying no. They go to different parts of our brain, and they're functioning as different mechanisms in our brain. All right. So then you went to this wrong end of the stick thing, and so the quote is, "We are something, we are not someone." And I keep running that through my head like that's supposed to mean something, and I can't make it mean anything. To be a thing, I'm a clump. I mean, I just don't. How does it matter whether I name the clump? Does it matter if we call it a someone? I just don't see the point of this. You know, you're just, again, I'm going to argue that sensation has a different substance to it than just pattern recognition, than just multiplication or division or some of these abstract concepts I could just float around my brain without any consequence to my personal sensibilities. Alright, so I listed 4 things here maybe we could agree on. So the first one was, I am a clump. The second one, clump is like an eddy in a stream. Many different moving parts. So here you have a stream, and you have a stream bed, and the idea is the water just goes racing down the stream bed. But because the stream bed is broken and there's dams and rocks and impediments in the way, these eddies are created. And these eddies become incredibly complex. There's all kinds of currents going on inside the eddies, all kinds of wiggles and waggles, and every bit of debris or anything else that's collected changes how the eddy functions and changes the path of the water and how it moves. And in certain circumstances where the conditions are right, where the stream bed is the right way and there's enough water and there's enough the right circumstance, this eddy creates a whirlpool. And so I would argue the whirlpool is consciousness, let's say. So maybe you hate this metaphor. I think it's a pretty good metaphor. And so consciousness is a unique feature of eddies. Whirlpool consciousness is this unique feature. Each one is going to be different. But the mechanics is always going to be causally the same. You need a certain amount of complexity, a certain amount of water, a certain amount of nuance in the in the stream bed to create the eddy that'll create the whirlpool. And that whirlpool is consciousness, and it's something different happening in an eddy with a whirlpool than an eddy without a whirlpool. Okay, I think it's an adequate metaphor. All right, 3. I'm created by environmental circumstances. So yeah, the stream, the amount of the water, and the stream bed create the eddy, create the whirlpool, create the whole thing. The whole thing is made out of stream water and circumstance of the bed of the stream. But it doesn't change the fact that there's an infinite number of configurations, and it doesn't change the fact that whirlpool is different than no whirlpool. Let's see. Alright, number 4. Particular kind of clumps creates whirlpool. Yeah, there I go. Conscious effect. Okay. So I've already said number 4. So anyway, I think that's maybe a metaphor that we work with, but maybe not. I think it's almost too abstract. But you're not, I don't know where to go, because you're not sitting there defining, you're not giving me anything back here. You're just saying pointy stick, wrong end of stick. Well, that's not too good a metaphor either. And if we're going to critique each other's metaphors, seeing a truck and being run over by the truck, I think, are quite obviously 2 different things as a personal experience. Alright, so number 4, we're back to sensation of pain. So your argument, I wrote here in quotes, sensation of pain, same as seeing truck. So you're saying that the function of the brain is the same mechanism, the same functionality that creates the sensation of pain is the same functionality that creates the recognition truck, red truck. I've now categorized it, I've recognized it. That's the same brain function that says, holy fucking shit, my leg is crushed, I feel like crap, I'm going to die. My arms are going to flail, I'm going to scream in horror because I feel this horrific sensation and this intense need to scratch this incredible itch, so to speak. An itch of nuclear magnitude. And I can't do anything about it because there's a fucking truck on me. Alright, so you're just saying, so I just wrote down, just pattern recognition. Ouch, not different than recognizing truckness. So, ouchiness is the same as truckness. Sorry. No, I don't think it is. Yeah, I don't know what else to say on that. I don't sense that it is. I don't feel, it doesn't feel that way. And I don't think that's how our brain works. Because I think, like I said before, that truckness is an abstract category concept. It's that's up here brain, and ouch is way inside their brain. And so I think you're trying to shove two different things, two different ends of a stick, and you're trying to say they're the middle of the stick. And they're not. The stick has two ends, and the two ends aren't the middle. So lastly, I'd say seeing is not feeling. Different brain function. So that's what I would say. My clump would say my learned experience, my education, my understanding of the natural sciences would say that seeing and feeling a qualitative sensation, one that has a negative and positive taint to it, one that is moving towards the relief of negative and one that is adding negative, that being the differential, let's say, in case the thing is made out of a steady state of negative and you're just making things more negative or less negative and creating the illusion of a carrot by removing a burden. You know, so it's like there's just stick, there's just anal probe, and if the horse does the right thing, you pull the probe back out, and if the horse does the wrong thing, you shove the probe harder in. I think that's a description of the circumstance, a theoretical description that needs to be disputed with something, and I haven't heard anybody dispute that as a possible explanation for how the mechanism functions. And but again, if we're going to reduce back to this question of I just don't get the something someone thing. I'm perfectly satisfied just to be called a something. You don't have to call me a someone. Alright, so let's play some of this for the hell of it.
Saying, of course, electrical and chemical signals don't say, but they're going to be interpreted by the brain as big red truck. Electrical chemical signals, they're not saying pain, but they're going to be interpreted as pain by the braiниum.
Well, the point is the brain is going to produce pain. It's going to produce a qualitative thing, and I'm saying that production is different than the production of red truck. You know, the words red truck, the idea of truck, the concept of truck is really different from the concept of my tooth just split open, the nerve is exposed, and there's this sharp, horrid pain shooting through my head. I mean, those two things are really different.
Same thing. They exist in the same way. I'm not denying pointy end. It's the blunt.
Yeah, all right, now we're going to get to the blunt end. So you just said, I'm not denying pointy end, but what you described as pointy end, I'm going to say isn't pointy end. Okay? I mean, no. The sensation is not the same mechanism as perceptual recognition. I don't think sensation and perceptual recognition are the same thing. They're both reflexes, but they're both reflexing on different things. I'm going to argue that the difference is something like something that affects the light bulb on the projector versus something that affects the lens on the camera. So if we go back to my analogy of a camera in to the projector to the screen, that's the difference, is that these things are affecting different locations in the stream of feedback. And in my opinion, one kind of effect is it's substantively and qualitatively, and in the meaning dimension, these are different things.
The end of the stick, get the right end of the stick, where I say what is experiencing that big red truck and what is experiencing the pain. that's where the problem arises.
I
Because there is...
I just don't see any problem. I just don't. What is? Again, I have already said the words. It's all a projection inside of a brain. All the parts are brain parts. It's all working inside the brain. There's nowhere outside that it's going. It's a thing happening inside of me, consciousness. It's happening inside my brain. My brain creates this theater. It creates the building, it creates the puppets, it creates the strings. It's all being created in my brain. All right, but I'm just going to argue that the strings, the puppets, and the theater are different things.
Nothing in here to be harmed. Or...
Again, I'm going to argue, as I did in my metaphors, that yes, there is. That there is this thing, a whirlpool happens when you create this consciousness, and it now becomes a different kind of physics, a different kind of environment is created that has a substantive, it creates a harmable, it creates an identity, it creates a value component. This thing can now be harmed, is what happens when you create consciousness whirlpools. It can now experience a negative sensation, a qualitatively negative sensation. So that would be like, that's not like the puppets beating each other up, it's not like the strings breaking, it's like the theater burning down. If the theater, that thing means something, that shines a light to the external world, or that has a material component. Well, it doesn't have a material component. Production. But again, I'm going to argue that value could never exist in this fucking material dimension. Of course, value couldn't exist in it. And you're convicting value because it has to be invisible to the material world. Value will never be visible in the material world. It'll only be visible in its dimension. And its dimension is the dimension of understanding. And once you understand that this phenomenon is created, the illusion exists, it is an identifiable thing, it is distinctly different than that thing, it's created by a different mechanism, as I'm arguing, in the brain, the whirlpool exists. And once it exists, it is being stated as a premise that once whirlpool exists, value exists. You won't see it, but it's what whirlpools make.
To see the big red truck. Now this is deep philosophy, and you're not there yet.
Oh, well, that's a little snarky. I really don't think it's that deep when you're basically saying you already know that it's exactly the same function of the brain that creates a sensation, a qualitative, positive or negative feeling, is the same thing as my eyes recognizing beard or bones or flesh. No, I don't think it is the same thing. Nah.
What there is here is a brainium, and the brainium seeing a big red truck is pattern recognizing. It's recognizing a pattern and doing the right thing. It doesn't really see a big red truck. It just it does what is appropriate for a big red truck being out there.
Well, even that's kind of dangerous language, but I'm not going to nitpick it. It does what it's been programmed through its experience, what red truck means, either potentially dangerous or not potentially dangerous. It's the bullet you don't hear that kills you, right? So whatever. What would I want to say to this? But again, I just don't buy the argument. That's just some sort of, it's the same mechanism. Oh, there's no point in me saying it again. The whirlpool is different than the rest of the eddy, and eddies with whirlpools are different than eddies without them. And the difference is one creates value, one does not.
Is it better to understand it like that? And for the pain of the big red truck running over the legs, it does what's appropriate for the pattern recognition of your legs being run over. It's all
Yeah, well, what it does that's appropriate. I mean, that even doesn't make much sense. But so what it does is go into a hysterical breakdown. So it's not even appropriate. It's just that it's already gone beyond what the mechanics were even anticipated. All right, so it's like it's just reacting because you're hitting it from the right way. You're poking it the right way, the way that makes it respond. But there's no continuity to it. There's good touch, bad touch. Okay, and bad touch can feel the same as good touch. Okay, I mean, being molested and being massaged can feel the same. They're obviously different in terms of what's doing the feeling. That's not a perfect example, but yeah, I mean, the mechanics of rape are pretty similar to the mechanics of sex. There's just a little differences here and there. But obviously the two things are different. So I'm just saying that the reaction is not necessarily that the mechanics of the built-in reflexes is crude simple, and so sometimes its reaction is hysterically stupid. I mean, sometimes, like I said, the killer pain it would give you from one bad tooth. I mean, it can just kind of get you eaten by a lion. You'll be so distracted by your toothache that you get eaten by a fucking lion. I mean, there's nothing productive in that. It's just that the mechanics are dirt simple, and so it's using a sensation pain, and if the tooth breaks, it really doesn't function like it's going to do you any good. All right? The pain isn't going to do you one bit of fucking good. It's just going to get you killed, probably.
Recognition. If you get over the fact that it's a big red truck out there and pain coming up, all you need to know is that this overall unit will do what is appropriate for what is out there. And
well, again, that I'm going to argue it won't do what's appropriate. It has minimal functionality. The drawbridge goes up, the drawbridge goes down. So sometimes the drawbridge is stupid and it goes down because it's fooled by the Trojan horse, or something else. So its reactions are not necessarily appropriate. They're just reactions. So, if we're going to get nitpicky on each other, I would nit on that one.
That's been going on for billions of years, through the millions of years, through the hundreds of thousands of years, to us now. And this, what we call a person, is a reactive group of atoms that reacts to things out there and in here in a way that is appropriate for Darwinian winning.
Right. I mean, appropriate, again, is just this tricky word. Probably shouldn't be using appropriate. We should just use the word it's consequential, or it's suited to the condition. I don't know. There's so many ways to, because obviously we have, stupid luck has been responsible for some of our victories in our past heritage, or just dumb luck, stupid things like, a meteor landed on the guy who was better than us. I mean, he tripped over a stick and fell off a cliff, but yeah, he would have killed us 2 years later.
Of things, but it is not a real thing. There is not a bottle inside the wrap paper that is being harmed by the legs being run over.
Well, again, you say so. All right, so I don't have any evidence to believe. I don't have any reason to believe that my perception of truck is the same function of my brain as my perception of that there's, my hand is in a flame, my flesh is burning, I can feel these neurons are sending these stick things to my brain, whapping the motherfucking hell out of me internally. I can't say perception of truck, perception of getting beaten, having the shit kicked out of me by my brain sensation creator, merely because my hand's on fire. Well, so what? I mean, why don't you just say your hand's on fire? I mean, truck, it makes me just say truck. It doesn't make me say, ow, 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 ow. I mean, come on. The sensations are completely different, even in their nature of how articulate they are. One's a fucking horn on a steamship, and one is a piccolo. I mean, one's an articulate, musical thing, and the other's just a big, loud, obnoxious windbag.
What you're getting is a reaction, the best reaction. The past, billions of years of past, have been able to clump together in an atomic form. That's what this is. The reaction is to be as appropriate as possible to continue doing its Darwinian things.
I know. Again, though, that you're just talking as if it didn't go through any stages, or there aren't plateaus, or there aren't levels to this evolution things that are distinctive levels. I mean, the mechanics of a plant versus the mechanics of, a group of fungi versus the mechanics of, a worm versus the mechanics of a lizard versus the mechanics of a mammal versus the mechanics of an ape versus the mechanics of a human being. They're structurally nuanced, and some of the distinctions are dramatic distinctions in terms of how the brain is functioning. Whirlpool, no whirlpool. Big difference.
Now, we give the names of seeing big red truck or feeling pain. But there is nothing here to see the pain, see the big red truck, or feel the pain. There's just
Yeah, I know. Again, it doesn't to say there's nothing here too when we do it. There's a problem right there. I mean, there's obviously something here that can do it. It does do it, so it's doing it. So there's no point in saying there's nothing here too, because it's doing it.
Programs, it's hitting little skittles as you go. Say, well, it sounds too simple, but we'll go with it. Hitting little skittles and eventually does the right thing. It does the right thing for pattern recognizing a red truck, a green tree, a curvy dame.
I understand that. I'm just saying I could make a pinball machine preposterously complex. I could put 10 billion pinball machines and connect them all so the pinball can go through all 10 billion of them before it gets to the flippers or whatever, or they all have flippers. It doesn't matter. Let's just do it without flippers for the sake of simplicity, because then we need somebody to hit the flippers. And what doesn't make it feel? It doesn't make it think. It doesn't make it do any of that stuff. So to just reduce us to matter again, that doesn't explain the distinction between me and 10 billion pinball machines. There's a difference between me, this clump, and a clump of pinball machines. It's different. It's not just, ball in, bouncy, 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 action out. I can make lots of things that do ball in, bouncy, bouncy, action out. All right, my computer does it. My computer does energy in, input in, bouncy, bouncy, shit the fuck out. It's not a fucking thing that's feeling. There's no continuity. It hasn't evolved to do this. It's just mechanics, okay? There's no whirlpool here. There's eddy, there's clump, but there's no whirlpool.
Or information coming up to say, legs have just been run over. But of course, the information coming in isn't legs have been run over, and it's not information coming in saying red truck or curvy dame.
Well, again, it just doesn't matter. I mean, I could make the same argument for the computer. All right? I mean, how the information is processed doesn't have much to do with the actual functionality of what it produces, whether it's a printed page or this image on the screen, or what else do computers do? A beep. It's what it produces doesn't have. There's no real obvious connection between the bits and bytes and that production. So how does this negate the substance of consciousness? I don't think it does.
They're just packets of information that the other, you could even call the brain packets of information, reacts with and does an appropriate thing. But the blunty end of...
Well, again, like I said, I can find any mechanical device in my house. I get this spray bottle. Well, there's no spray in it. But this lighter, you pull a little wheel, sparky, fire. I mean, you know, look, it's fire. Look, fire. I mean, it's matter. I mean, the fact that something complicated and lots of bits are flying around and there's in and out doesn't make it mean that we are just a fucking lighter. I'm not a fucking lighter. There's a distinction between what I can do and what this stupid fucking thing can do.
Is that there is nothing being harmed here. That's the thing.
Well, again, you're going to keep talking about it as if it would manifest itself. Like you're almost forcing the infinite regression thing. You're saying that I have to come up with the little man inside the little man, inside the little man, inside the little man that's saying, ow, you broke my leg. Of course nothing's being harmed. The mechanics of the machinery is designed to avoid harm. That's the reason the whole fucking thing exists, is to prevent this body thing from being harmed. It's to prevent it from starving to death or being killed, all right, before it does its replicating properly. But that's the whole design function of the machine, is to stop this body from being harmed. Of course there's nothing inside the brain being harmed, okay? Because that would be degrading to its own functionality. Why would my computer processor, when there's an error in JavaScript, let's say there's a JavaScript error on this page, what fucking good would it do my computer to burn half the CPU? All right, to destroy the CPU, to break the wires on the CPU because there's a JavaScript error? That would be idiotic. So, of course, there's no harm inside my brain. There's the creation of harm. There's the creation of sensation. There's a creation of a positive or negative feeling. A negative or more negative feeling, to be exact, by my standards. But yes, that's what is created. It generates a whirlpool of negativity, of bad, of thing to be avoided. It generates it. It doesn't do damage to itself. It creates the very idea of damage.
You can talk about your pain and your suffering. It's a group of atoms doing something.
No, again. I'm not a lighter. I'm not a car. I'm not a computer. I'm not a fucking food processor. I'm not a fucking coffee machine. So this is just bullshit. It's not just atoms, input, output. There's more going on here.
Always go back to, well, I can feel it, you can feel it, we can all feel it, a rat in Tuvalu can feel it. But that's irrelevant, because the rat in Tuvalu is the same as me, and it's the same as you. It's just a clump of atoms that in...
Yeah, that is creating the whirlpool of consciousness, which in turn is creating the vortex of value. It as accessing through that whirlpool the value dimension. That's what's happening.
Your history has made to react in a certain way, and that's all it is. It's a reaction like this.
Right, and I'm simply arguing that the reaction is so significant, is so nuanced, it's a particular kind of reaction. A sensation, we could agree, is a particular kind of reaction. It only takes place in a consciousness, it only takes place under these certain circumstances, and then you have this particular little ball of time-space behavior, all right, of skittles moving in a particular way, and it only happens at these certain moments and these certain times inside of these certain beasties, and we can qualify that as a unique event. It's this event that only happens under those circumstances, and what I'm arguing is when that certain circumstance happened, whether it's a car that runs over your leg or whether it's a tumor that presses against your frontal lobe, it doesn't really matter. It creates these horrific sensations, these terribly unpleasant to the consciousness experiencing the sensations that are the creation of value in the universe. That's the consequence of them. They create something that has actual substantive value in the sense that it is something better not to have happened. Everything else can happen forever and ever and ever, but if it's going to cause that stuff, okay, it shouldn't happen. We can say the words. It should not. It would be better if anything but that happens.
An incoming like this. And if it's appropriate, that means the clump of atoms will go on into the future to do it again. But there is no bottle wrapped in the paper. There is no soul. There is nothing being harmed.
Well, those two, comparing to a soul is stupid, because I don't believe in a soul. And again, there's nothing to be harmed. Again, the concept of harm is associated with a word like damage or destructive, and I'm just associating with the word negative sensation. That the only way to do harm, there's no such thing as destructive. I mean, blowing something up isn't inherently destructive. It only becomes destructive when there's something that can be harmed. So unless you're hurting a sentient creature somehow, unless the qualitative, experiential effect of the whirlpools, and unless you're affecting whirlpools, all right, and causing whirlpools to generate negative sensation, an event has no meaning. It only has meaning if it's going to affect what happens to whirlpools. Whether whirlpools all over the universe are creating more negative or more less negative. That's it. That's the definition of harm. There isn't a physical breaking. That's a notion of an organism that has a physique, the body, that you're programmed to protect. Again, you use the mocking rhetoric that if you're going to be a philosopher, you have to step by that. You have to step way past that notion being the definition of these words. The definition of a negative isn't the destruction of a human body. The definition of a negative is the creation of a negative vortex creating whirlpool.
At all. There is what we call a feeling of red truck and pain and suffering and this, but it is happening to no one. There is no one here. There is something here.
Well, you're just not going to get away with that one and make any sense. Like I said, I don't give a fuck about... I don't know how you make a distinction between a something and a no thing. I mean, just saying it's no one, fine. Like I said, who cares? I just care that you acknowledge it as a something. As long as we have a clump and as long as we have a whirlpool, then my game is on. If you're going to tell me the whirlpool doesn't exist or the clump doesn't exist, well, then we have an argument. Okay, but as soon as you say there is a whirlpool, there's an eddy and there's a whirlpool in it, if you're going to concede that, then my game's on. I win.
But there is no one here. Yeah? There's no one in the rat in Tuvalu. There's no one to be me, and there's no one to be...
Well, like I said, there's no internal little man inside this little man, okay? Granted, you're not going to break the little midget's leg, okay? When you're, that's not how pain is created, okay? Pain isn't created because you break a little midget's leg inside of my brain, all right? That's not how it's created. It's not created the same way just like computer programming doesn't create images. It's not the same stuff. Little images aren't flying through the cord here. Little tiny images aren't flying through this cord and popping on the screen. It's not made of the same stuff. So how the brain manufactures a feeling, it doesn't manufacture it out of little dwarfs with little broken legs.
There's just things reacting. If it's doing it Darwinianly right, it's acting appropriately to the external or internal stimuluses. And that is where I would like the main thing to be concentrated on, the blunt end of the stick. That there is no body here, there is only something here.
Yeah, well, whatever. Something versus no body versus no thing. This doesn't matter. As long as you concede there's a something, and as long as you concede the something is doing something different than this cigarette lighter, my game, again, is on.
And some things cannot suffer. They cannot suffer at all, because they're only...
They can create suffering. That's the phenomenon they create. They create it inside a perceptual mechanism called brain.
Programs running. And programs running do not suffer. They just react in an appropriate way.
Well, again, appropriate's not the right word to use. And, no, the reactions are different. I already went through it. There's differences. Okay? The brain has a qualitative mechanism, a mechanism of good, bad, positive, negative, reinforce, discourage, however you want to describe it. It has a carrot stick mechanism. I mean, quite obviously, there has to be something that can be carroted and sticked. Okay? I mean, obviously, there's no horse inside of us. Okay? But the point is, the mechanism itself, it's in the nature of the whip itself. It doesn't have to actually hit something. The carrot doesn't have to be seen by something. It creates the actual thing itself. It creates carrot and it creates stick as an entity. It creates the whip snap. It creates the end product. Let's see how to force this without getting into this stupid infinite reduction, regression bullshit. It creates the negative quanta in the value dimension. That's what whirlpools do. It's not. Yeah, there's just no other way to say it. Just as if magnetism could actually, doesn't matter to the universe, but magnetism could be, ouch. It could be sensation. That could be what magnetism is. It's sensation. So every time a magnet turns on, it could just be going screaming in horror, in a sense. It could be just a horrible pain in the universe. It is now in the value dimension. We just have no access to that knowledge. We have no way of knowing because we're not magnetic. We're not being the magnetism. So we don't know what's going on. But it could be. The universe could be incredibly, incredibly horrific in terms of what kind of perceptual manifestations it's creating out of these raw materials. The whip snap. But I tend to doubt it just because, fortunately, there's no evidence that this stuff goes on all over the place. Thankfully. So anyway, enough of a video. But, whatever. I prefer to... well, it doesn't really matter. You can... whatever. This video, it doesn't to your taste either, then, I guess there'll be a point where we just we'll drift off again. So anyway, till next time.